Yo, how do I sound? Can everybody hear me okay? I think I set it up right. Yeah, you like the music? 3 a.m. Turtles likes the music. That's all from the new album that I wrote. This one right here. So that one's out. Pretty stoked about that. A bunch of people who backed the Kickstarter are going to get that album, which is really cool. Sweet. Yeah, audio sounds okay. There's no like crazy robot voice or something. I had a bunch of problems with that last time. All right, sweet. Cool, we'll get into it. I'm going to play music for myself to listen to. Let's see, what do I want to listen to? Let's listen to that. All right. Okay, so let's see, we got to color some pages. So last time we were working on this album, or I mean this page, not album. I still have music on the brain. So this one came a long way off stream. So basically I colored a bunch of stuff off stream where I turned it a lot bluer. For anybody who was watching the last time, it probably looked something like, hang on, I got to turn off a bunch of layers. Like maybe that. Yeah, it was looking much more like that when I was coloring it last time. And then I spent some time off stream and I pushed it really far into the frost because at this part of the story she like freezes to death basically. So I wanted to push it a lot more blue than it was looking on stream, but I had this really cool like base of yellow and purple. So that turned out really good actually. And then once I kind of unlocked that, where I realized I needed a lot more blue and sort of icy feel to this panel, I actually worked on the one before it, and I brought a lot of that kind of like blue icy feeling here. So these two kind of go together now. Last time we worked on the chili man popping out of the water, so we got this like crazy fire and ice look going. And then this panel, so the bottom half of this page is basically done. Then there's a bunch of these shots that have all these columns in the water. Where is it? Yeah, so this one, I haven't showed this page yet. This page needs some love. But I want to color all the shots with the columns together so that it kind of has the same, I want to stay in the same mindset. I tend to do that. I batch together like panels that have the same kind of like backgrounds or colors so that they don't drift too much. So this page is all like the columns over the water, and you can see them flying here. So I'm going to save this top panel until I get to there. But this sequence that has her freezing has some stuff we can color where she falls into the water. So this is all the same sequence. We've got her eye freezing over here. So that's part of this sequence. This is just like a 3-page sequence where she falls in the water and starts to freeze. So we've got her eye here with the frost on the eyelashes, which is really cool. So that kind of like matches up with this one. So like I'm kind of in that mindset of like frozen in the water. So I might do the eyelash panel, and we could also do her actually falling into the water. The sequence is really good. Like these two panels in the bottom right here, where she's actually like plunges into the water and then comes up for air and then starts to freeze. So we'll try to do sort of that, stay in that mindset and do that sequence today. What do I use to make art? Well, Lydia does all the line art. She does all the line art with traditional pen on paper. So if I turn off the colors, you can actually see what her work looks like. So Lydia does all this with a brush, a dip pen and a brush. And then she scans it and gives it to me. And I mean, there's actually like quite a lot here that is, because she uses traditional methods, it's got this really cool grit and like texture to it that you can simulate digitally, but it's hard. You have to kind of like go the extra mile and do the extra work. So this one is kind of a good example of what happens when this is what she gives to me, and then I put all the color in, and it starts to come to life a little bit. But I still love her stuff even without color, to be honest. It's great. So I guess, I don't know. I did this panel. This panel's working really well. I'm going to do the one that comes before it in this sequence. I think this frozen eye is perfect. So let me set it up. I just want to have, so I like to do this 2-up split view so I can see, as I'm working on stuff that's like in the same concurrent sequence, I can see exactly what I did before, and I can easily like sample stuff. So we'll do these together. And this is like a really good, this one on the left is a really good panel to do on stream because I think we can do the whole thing. So you can kind of see, the problem with some of the stuff I was doing last time is you need a lot of time, and it like kind of comes together in the last 10%. And it can look, if you're on stream, it can just look like you're like messing around and not really unlocking it. And then it takes a really long time, and then finally it'll unlock. But it's hard to do that all in one stream. So this one is a sort of a less ambitious panel. I think we can like show the entire process from start to finish, and you can sort of see that unlock moment at the end when it suddenly starts to make sense. Because until that unlock moment, it looks like, I don't know, kind of like amateurish in my opinion. It's like if you've ever painted with acrylics or oils like on actual canvas, that happens a lot. You do a lot of underpainting, you do a lot of like shading, and you can't quite make it work. And then all of a sudden it kind of like comes together when you add the last pop of highlights. So that kind of happens to me when I color comics. So we'll try to have that moment here on stream. All right, let's see. So I'm just turning off some layers so I can start to sample what I was doing here. All right, let's see. Okay, cool. So we'll work on this one. Yeah, so I'm basically just like replicating what I did over here on the right. Just to kind of give it the sense that it's a close-up, because that's what it is. It's an insert shot. It's an insert close-up. 6099X, huge haul on Kickstarter. Yeah, we raised so much money. It was awesome. We raised like almost 25 grand. We're still waiting for all the final payments to clear, but it looks like almost everybody's payment is going to go through. And yeah, we'll have raised over 24 grand for one issue, one issue of our comic book, which is awesome. We had like over 450 orders. I can't even remember how many orders it is right now, but it's like, for context, the last time we did a comic, we did, I think we raised 6 grand, and so we quadrupled that. And the last time we did a comic, we ended up printing 500 copies of each issue, and we did that to give ourselves like some extra copies, so we could sell them at cons, stuff like that. This time, we have almost 500 orders just from the Kickstarter. So if we want extra copies, we're going to have to print like, I don't know, 1,000 copies of each issue. So I don't really know what I'm going to do with, I don't know, 3,000 copies of a comic. Like we're going to have to get like a storage space or something. Oops. But yeah, thanks to everybody who donated. It was amazing. It was like truly just overwhelming to see like the support that people brought out for us. Considering, we're pretty small. All of our stuff is through like social media and word of mouth. Like we don't have traditional advertising, obviously. We're not even in comic book stores. So that was amazing to have everybody do that. I'm very grateful and thankful. All right, so I'm just going to put the blue gradient in. I'm going to cheat this a little bit. If you look over here, you can see, so like basically we're doing obviously a close-up of her eye. If I were to obey the colors in this cropping exactly, we actually wouldn't see any blue because, or very little blue at least, because for the most part, the blue is only on the frost. But I'm gonna actually we're basically looking at her cheek, right, in the close-up. But I actually am gonna cheat it and put the same blue gradient I have down here on her chin on the bottom of her cheek in this panel, just to give it. I just want the sense that like ice is overtaking her in every single shot. So even though there's not really a lot of blue creeping up on her skin on the right here and on her cheek, I'm gonna cheat it and bring the blue way, way higher just for this insert shot, because I think that'll be like a lot more, I don't know. It'll just feel colder, you know what I mean? Like it'll feel more intense. Cool. I'm using a pen. If you're talking about what pen I use, I just use a Wacom Intuos pen. I don't draw directly on the screen. A lot of people most people who do comics like have some kind of setup where they have like a Wacom or an iPad Pro where they actually have a screen and they're like coloring directly on the screen. I don't do that. I learned how to do this so long ago that I don't even think that those products existed. So I only know how to do like I basically am looking at the screen while I'm over here on the side with my like Wacom tablet. So we'll see how much longer I can do that. I don't even know how much longer they're going to make the kind of like Wacoms that don't have a screen on them. But for me, I've got it dialed in. Like I know exactly where my hand is and where it's going to be on the screen, which is like a weird leftover skill from like the mid 2000s. All right, let's see. So it looks like Lydia drew the beginnings of frost. You can see like down here, there's like frost creeping up on her cheek, which is really cool. So we want to definitely like honor that. Maybe we'll just like hack that shape in. And I'll just call the layer cheek frost. All right, so I'm going to set the brush to like 60, 70, 70%-ish. And just like get the beginnings of the frost in here. And there might not be enough contrast, but we'll worry about that later. I'm just trying to get shapes in. I just want to kind of like know what I'm working with. So it doesn't really matter if it's not the right color yet. I just want to get the shape in and then I can start modifying it. That's the benefit of digital, is like everything you lay down becomes basically just a shape to modify endlessly if you want. A much different experience than working traditionally. All right, so just a little bit of like frost creeping on our cheek. What was working when I was doing this frost on the other panel, I don't know if you can see, I'll zoom in more, is the halftones. You do all of this and then you do a halftone of like white. You use like a halftone brush to get this like white texture, and that adds like both the sense of like crystallization and a highlight. It like works really well actually. So just sample something off over here. There it is. There's one. And I'll just overlay it directly as a clipping mask directly onto it. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. So it's just kind of like gets a nice deep, rich blue at the bottom. And we can always go back in and like soften some of the edges so it feels more like frost, and we can add some highlights along the edges so it feels more, I don't know, more, I think that's what makes it feel icy, is when you take pure white, you go in on the edges and you just like color that in. So we'll do that. But I'm also going to take this same kind of frost color. I'm going to do her eyelashes. This is one of my favorite drawings that Lydia did in the whole book. There's like these icy eyelashes. So I'm going to do that. It's like there's like snowflakes all across her eyelashes. It's like, it looks like someone, you know, who's freezing truly. Like an Everest documentary. So for this one, I'm just going to use a straight 100% opaque brush. And I'm just going to... This will take a little bit of time just to get the shapes right, because I think what's so nice about them is there's this like feathery detail on it. It's really beautiful. So I just want to kind of get that correct. Lydia hasn't put like super defined edges on these, so sometimes I'm just going to have to like make my own creative choice about where the edges are. But I can see from her line work sort of like the shape that she's going for, like this feathery, frosty shape. And I can kind of just like, when I'm not sure where the lines are, and there's a lot of overlapping too, like once you get like below this, like I'm putting a line right now, once you get like below this line, all of these frosty edges kind of just blend together. So you can kind of just like start, maybe we do that. We start at the base of the eyelashes where we know all of it is just going to overlap. We don't have to worry about defined edges yet. And just work that in. And then as we come up, we can start to define the individual like frosty eyelashes a little bit. Same with down here. Anything close to the eye line, I can just like start by getting it in with our very rough shape, because this is, again, we know this is where it all overlaps. Oh yeah, the scratch lines are, so she's got a really kind of like cool textured scratchy style. Just a lot of detail, but it's all dip pen on paper, so it just has that natural quality of like, I don't know, scratchy, textured, authentic, real, classic, old school comics. It's really cool. Again, you can simulate this. There's brushes that simulate this, but there's an unpredictability to working on paper. Like you're not exactly sure how scratchy your lines are going to be sometimes, and it's like the unpredictability that you have to embrace that gives you that like really cool, classic, like old school comic feel. It's hard to get that kind of unpredictability of like real ink running around on the page and drying differently and dry brushing being different than you expect it to be. Like you have to embrace that if you want to work traditionally, but if you're willing to, you get, I think, a much richer page. But you also have to know kind of what you're doing when you scan it. You have to have like your settings set up properly. So it's tricky. But the scratchy lines are, I don't know if anybody knows the French artist Mobius. He had a lot of really cool, like almost like tick marks that he put in all his drawings. Like he has like this super weird, it's not really hatching. It's like he'll just make like dotted lines everywhere, and sort of has a scratchy feel to it too. It's really cool. He's like a really big influence on me. His color palettes are a really big influence on me. And then he's obviously like amazing with anatomy, stuff like that. So he's like one of the only comic book artists, in my opinion. I mean, there's maybe like 20 ever who literally have it all. Like they can do body language, expressions, perfect anatomy, like perfect storytelling, and amazing color palettes, and like, incredible, interesting page layouts that are never like overwhelming, but are always like in service of the story. Mobius is like probably one of our biggest influences, or somebody we talk about. Lydia and I talk about Mobius a lot. The French comic scene in general has been like a really big influence on us. My favorite comic book artist is probably, there's a few of them. So In the French scene, I can break it down by country, probably. So in the French scene, it's probably Mobius or Enki Bilal. Not a lot of people nowadays know those guys. They were like really big in the 70s and 80s. But yeah, Mobius is a god. He did the Incal. And then he also did a really underrated, I don't know if it's underrated. Not a lot of people seem to know it anymore. But Silver Surfer Parable, I think it's called. The Mobius Silver Surfer comic is amazing. So Enki Bilal and Mobius are my two favorite artists from France. From Belgium, my favorite comic artist is the guy who does Tintin. Hergé, I think you say. I hope I'm saying it right. Hergé. He's probably one of the most influential comic book artists on me. It was like one of the first comics that I read that I really started to understand things like how to do pacing and character design, sound effects. Oh, nice. You have it. Did you start a TikTok account to show off your, Miles, did you start a TikTok account to show off your art, or did you already have one? Oh yeah, this is going to be cool, man. This is going to be like Frost overtaking the whole page and on her eyeball. That'll be really good. And then my favorite comic book, let's see, my favorite comic book artist, American comic book artist. I really like Daniel Warren Johnson right now. I feel like Daniel Warren Johnson emerged fairly recently as just like a total, like just amazing, like totally respected. It felt like out of nowhere, all of a sudden everybody had him on their favorite lists, but he's awesome. The reason I like his stuff so much is that it reminds me of Lydia's art in our books. I'm not saying our stuff is as good as Daniel Warren Johnson, but I see similar like DNA, you know what I mean? Like I see the same influences and the same sort of like methods, same materials being used. So there's a similarity to the style for sure. Let's see, who else do I like? I like, I don't know. It's hard not to say Jack Kirby too, but everybody says Jack Kirby. But it's like he did all this stuff like and invented everything. You know what I mean? Like there's people who are amazing and have amazing anatomy and storytelling, but like they're all influenced by Jack Kirby. So the fact that he did it first is like, you got to give him some kind of credit. You know what I mean? Nice. Post art vids, man. We need more art videos, like real, actual good art videos on TikTok. One thing that I'm not loving about social media lately is it seems like I don't know, it seems like a lot of content is less about process and is more about like just memes and stuff. I mean, I guess it's always been that way, but I feel like when I scroll through my feed now, I'm not getting a lot of like cool process stuff. I'm getting like, it's like templates where somebody put a meme, somebody screaming for 5 seconds over top. Maybe that'll change though. I've heard that in December they push content differently because they're trying to like, you know, it's the holidays and there's more ads. And so they're trying to make more room for advertisers. So they probably push like shorter content, stuff like that. So maybe, hopefully it'll go back to being a little bit more interesting in the new year. All right, so I'm trying to figure out where to put the highlights. Again, I'm basing everything off of this panel on the right here, where my reference is. So I've got kind of like, it looks like I put some highlighting under her eyeball. Like I'm trying to create the sense that there's like an intense light maybe coming a little bit from below on her eyeball over here on the right. Yeah, because I've also, you can see I caught like there's a little bit of a highlight, oops, over here on the underside of her like eye socket too. So it's like when you have lighting on the underside of the eye socket, it means that lighting is coming and hitting you kind of like from below. So I like that feel, but I have to be careful because I can't just make up lighting that's not what Lydia intended. You can see Lydia put really heavy shading under her eye to create this kind of like scary intensity to the panel. Putting any kind of like dark circles or shading under somebody's eye is like an instant read of like terror or anxiety. So I have to be kind of careful how I do this because I want to kind of honor what I did and the choices I made, but I also don't want to change her vision either. Let me try to put a little highlight here, see how it feels. Under eye highlight. Scott Christian Sava. Shout out. I don't know his work, but I'll check it out. All right, let's see. So yeah, I'm gonna try to make sure that I get the shading correct on here. But what ends up happening is you spend all this time doing this like purpley yellowy shading, and then you just go through with blue and you kind of like soften it all back anyway because you want it to feel like she's freezing. That's what I did over here. I spent all this time doing essentially like an underpainting on the right here, and then I covered up a bunch of it with blue, but whatever. We'll not worry about that. You have to do a lot of underpainting to kind of like discover what you're really doing. Sometimes you end up hiding a lot of it. And that's okay. That's part of the process, and it's all part of trusting the process, you know. Oh, this is cool. I didn't really realize this, but so there's these flames that are sort of like burning the edge. There's a lot of kind of like semi-fourth wall breaking stuff in this book when this character shows up. This like chilly character. So he's like throwing fire that's like actually burning up the side of the page. Like you can see the panel edges on fire, but it actually is like coming down on this panel too. So we have to color that in. So that'll be kind of cool. It'll give a nice contrast to have a yellow shape here against like what's going to end up being like a pretty blue purpley panel. So all right. Well, let's do some detailing in the eye. There's a lot here that was working about her eyeball. So I'm basically replicating what I did over here. So we've got a reference on the right. I'm just going to turn off some layers so I can see what it looked like before I put the final detailing in. Oh, okay. Okay, so this is where I was. So now I've got the panel on the right exactly to where the panel on the left is. So I can kind of see, I have to remember what I did. So I went in with sort of like these like tangerine magenta colors, which were sampled off of this chili guy over here. It's like he's reflecting in her eye. And then I did some darker orange in the middle. Okay, so we'll sample this magenta color. What up, Giovanni B? Peace right back at you, man. I hope I'm saying your name right. I apologize if I didn't. Yeah, the problem, you can see our subscriber count down here on the right. We're like nearing 200K, which is like insane. Never, ever, ever, ever thought I would get like the channel to that point. To be honest, once you pass like 100K, people do not go in the comments and write peace. They write pretty awful, mean stuff. So we've been getting a lot of that lately. I have a lot of words filtered, so probably a lot of people don't see it because it just gets like filtered out automatically. Because I actually know a lot of like what people come in and say. Like there's obviously like the automatic filtering on the comments on YouTube. Anyway. but I've added a bunch of words that I know like people come in and use. It's like trolls who have the same kind of talking points. But anyway, it's nice when people write nice things. Because it does, believe it or not, it does actually make a difference, you know. Like you think when somebody has hundreds of thousands of subscribers that they're like this like amorphous non-human who just like exists outside of the real world or something. At least that's how I used to think about content creators. But if somebody writes a nice thing, especially if it's like what somebody was saying earlier, that was like, you know, you inspired me to make my own comics. Like that stuff really like makes a really big difference, you know. Really like it inspires me back, you know, like to the idea, because I can think of so many comics that were really like truly inspirational to me when I was a kid, and knowing that we might be passing that along is like extremely powerful. It's not really, nobody's sending like, there's no like specific group or person who's sending hate or anything like that. It's not like we've been brigaded or something. It's just like, there's just like a certain vibe of comic fan that I just can tell. They just kind of come in looking, I think a lot of it is born from their own insecurities, frankly. Once I realized that, it like really helped me understand what was happening. You know, they might feel insecure about their own art or the fact that their content hasn't been getting traction or something, and they'll kind of come in and take that out on us a little bit, you know. And it doesn't happen like 24/7. We still get a lot of nice comments, but it definitely happens a lot more once you have 190 whatever 2,000, because I think they don't see you as a person. All right, so see what's interesting here. I had this cool yellow sort of rim lighting on the iris, right? Like I'll zoom in farther so you can see it. So there's like really cool rim lighting on the iris here on the left side. That's like just a little edge. I don't think it's anatomically correct, but it gives you a little pop of that shape when you're zoomed out. So when I zoom all the way out, it just kind of gives her eye a little bit of definition, which is really nice. I'm kind of mindlessly replicating it over here on the left. And I kind of was on autopilot. I'm just like replicating what I'm seeing over here on the right. But this is a close-up, and it sort of functions differently, because when they're at the same zoom distance, obviously here, I'll put them at this. So they're almost the exact. This is cool, actually. This is the kind of stuff I hope this kind of stuff is valuable, because it's like there's a bunch of stuff I've never seen anybody talking about on social media. It's like this super specific stuff. So I've got two panels that are both in the bottom right of pages. They're both about the same size, and they're actually depicting the same thing. But one is a super tight close-up on the left of an eyeball, and one is like not as tight close-up, still pretty tight, but relative distance, that eyeball is much further away on the right. So you want to use things like rim lighting around the iris over here to help that smaller eyeball kind of just like have some definition when it's zoomed out. But when it's this big, when the eyeball is this big, you kind of no longer need those kinds of rim lighting effects, because you have so much more detail, because you have this like round shape that's very defined. So I actually think it was a mistake to just like mindlessly replicate what I did on the right, because it's a kind of a different set of conditions. It's a different zoom level. So I'm actually going to go in and try to take that away, because I actually think that the definition of this circle is strong enough on its own, and we could always add it back in, but let's do that. And the other thing that's going to happen is that instead of this panel starts to be metaphorical. So instead of it being an actual pupil in her eye, Lydia drew like flames like reflected in her eye, and it also starts to feel like her eyeball's burning. So that's going to change some of the color. I may actually want to go darker on the iris here because I'm going to want those like bright yellow, almost near white flames that I'm going to put in over top. Like I want them to have a darker base so they pop. So I think before I do anything else on this part of the eye, I'll get that shape in and we can kind of make a call, because a lot of coloring is relative. You kind of want to understand like the contrast of values so you can make a smart choice. So I'm gonna just like hack in the flames, and then that'll kind of inform really what we're doing. And I gotta start grouping my layers because I'm gonna get lost. So these are, okay, so you can see I'm building it up so that the frost is over top. So the blue frost, I'm gonna call this frost. This is under the eye. Oh, I see. It's this yellow layer under the eye. Hi, Miles. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to everyone. This panel is very appropriate because it's like wintry, snowy frost. Someone freezing. So it's very, like, this one's definitely a good one to do in December. Puts us all in the holiday spirit. All right, let's see. So this is our eyeball layer. We've got some rogue. See, this is what happens when you just are lazy. I'm like so disorganized with my layers all the time. So watch, as I turn the eyeball layers on and off, this yellow orange area is going on and off, but I've got like rogue, I don't know if you can see that. There's like on the top up there, there's like rogue eyelashes that I accidentally drew on the wrong layer, which matters later when I'm going to be doing like a bunch of like broad kind of gradients and effects across that. So I got to kind of figure out where that is. Oh, so it's these. I accidentally drew these on the eyeball layer. All right, so we're going to do a little trick. I'm sure this exists in other programs, but in Photoshop, if you accidentally draw on the wrong layer, you cut it, and then you go to the layer you want it to be on, which would be the eyelash frost layer here. And you do paste special, paste in place. There it is. And then you merge it with this layer. Yeah, now all the frosty eyelashes are on the same layer. So when I go back in and I'm doing a bunch of halftones and shading on the blue, there's not like weird rogue eyelashes that are on a different layer that aren't getting affected. What program is this? 3 AM Turtles? This is Photoshop, but I'm not necessarily... Hey, Adobe, if you're watching, sponsor us. I always shout out your stuff. I'm not even sponsored by Adobe, but I always am using Adobe stuff. I know a lot of people have reasons why they don't use Adobe, and that's cool. I honestly am not sitting here telling you that you have to use any of these programs. I use Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign, but that's honestly because I started making comics in 2002, 2003. I think it was 2002. Back then, there really weren't that many programs that were up to the level of Photoshop in terms of being able to do this. Like, it was pretty much the only, if you really wanted like to scan your artwork, actually like properly adjust your line art, and then like be able to work with like robust layers and layer effects and stuff. It was pretty much Photoshop. Now, of course, there's like a bunch of really great other options. So I use Photoshop, but I don't talk about Photoshop as like something that you have to have. And a lot of people ask that in the comments of our videos, especially the coloring videos, because I don't say like, here's how to, do this specific kind of effect in Photoshop. I'll tell you like, here's how to render shadows using purple, which you can do in any program. So I'm not really trying to discourage anybody who can't, like, for example, afford a certain program, because I know there's like certain programs that are more expensive than others, but I'm so ingrained into the Adobe pipeline just because I started so long ago. and it's still a pretty viable, relevant program that I've never been forced to change. I know a lot of people use Procreate on iPad. It seems to be like the most popular option, although Clip Studio is getting more popular, and I heard that Clip has added some pretty good lettering tools in it. Somebody was asking earlier about my favorite comic book artists. One of my favorite comic book artists is named Tony Moore, who did, I shout him out all the time. He was the original artist on the original Walking Dead, like the first 6 or 8 issues or something like that. If you buy like the Walking Dead trade paperbacks, it's like volume 1 is Tony Moore art. So he recently like commented on one of our videos that he uses Clip, or he's been using Clip Studio. So I thought that was cool, that like a total industry pro is using something that isn't Photoshop, you know, which means the industry has really changed since I was in high school. Vincent, can we get your comics only on Kickstarter, or will you create a shop online? So we actually, for a long time, were selling our stuff on our online stores, just like badinkstudios.com, but we shut the online store down for the Kickstarter just because we can't handle running a Kickstarter and, an online store both. But, so we're going to use all the money that we raised on Kickstarter. We have so much money raised that we're going to print like tons of extra stuff, which is our goal. Our actual goal on Kickstarter was like $6,000, and that would have like barely covered some of the printing of stuff, you know? But we made so much money that we can print like, 500 extra copies of every comic and like 50 extra copies of all the cassettes. Shout out my music, I guess. Check out the Batting Studios official soundtracks. They're dope. I write all the music. A bunch of people backed the tapes, and so we're going to do extra copies of the tapes. We're going to do extra copies of the stickers and the pins. So anyway, it's all to say, like, after we fulfill the Kickstarter orders, we're going to list all the extra stuff. We're going to have a bunch of stock that we're going to list on badinkstudios.com store. And then we're also going to be selling it all at cons next year. So we've already signed up for a couple cons in New Jersey. We're going to do cons in New York State. And I don't know, maybe like Baltimore or something. I don't know. A bunch of people ask us about Chicago, Baltimore. We're in the tri-state area on the East Coast, so it's hard to go beyond the East Coast. Like we'd have to actually like travel with like hundreds of comics and stuff. And all the banners. This banner right here. These are all behind me. They're like con banners that I have up. Just a lot of stuff you have to take to a con. So usually places that, we're a very small operation, so usually if we go to a con, it's like places, we can drive because it's really hard to like get all this stuff there anyway. But if you are on the East Coast, you can always buy our stuff in person, and we always give like discounts and signed stuff, all that. I really like how you separated the flames from the rest of the eyeballs using the highlights. Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to do, right? Is this entire eye is an exercise. This is a very tricky panel, actually, because it's an exercise in contrast. And I think the trick here that is working is that the flames are not yellow. They are down in the bottom, but they're actually white up top, and I want the eye to be yellow. So I need to go even lighter than yellow, which is already pretty light, in the flames to get it to pop. In fact, I'm going to push the flames just to pure white. Whoops. Because it's still an off-white color. So the inside of the flames right now are sort of, you can see sort of like cream color that I sampled off of the paper, the old newsprint, like comic book newsprint texture. But I'm going to go like pure white. I'm just going to like push it all the way over to white here. And I'm going to, yeah, that'll help a lot. I'm just going to get a really big brush. I'm just going to like take the flames to like white. I think a lot of people, a lot of people don't understand or don't realize, and it's just an experience thing. So much of comic coloring is non-literal. Like in your brain, you're like, okay, flames, red and orange. But you can have more impact if you do something like, okay, I'm going to make the eyeball the color of the flames. I'm going to make the flames white to get them to pop, and then that'll be the brightest part of the image. That's where your eye is supposed to go, I guess, pun intended. Because when I zoom out, you're going to look at the brightest part. I want you to look at what she's looking at. This is about her looking at this burning book that the chili pepper is lighting on fire, right? So that's the point of drama in the story, and I want to highlight that point of drama. I want to make that the brightest part of the image. So that's really cool. It's actually working better than I expected. Oh, nice. Yeah, I feel bad. A lot of people are finding our comics after the Kickstarter's already ended, and they're like messaging us saying, you know, that they're sad that they missed them. But I mean, I guess if you wanted to, you could always just like email. We would still honor if somebody emailed us right now. We would still honor like Kickstarter prices and everything. You could just like PayPal us, and we would just add your order to the pile and ship out your stuff when the Kickstarter orders go out. I mean, I could just consider it an extension of the Kickstarter if you want to email us. We've got like all of our contact info on our website, but yeah, I'd do that, because it's like if you missed it by a couple days, it's like I don't want you to like be bummed, you know. I forgot to do the corner of her eye, this little like pink part in the corner of your eye, whatever. There's a name for that. It's like near where your tear duct is. But let's like push it really hard to. Let's go even harder. Just make it straight up like red. There's some layer on top of it that's like really dulling. Oh, it's this layer, right? Yeah, okay. So there's a layer on top of it, like a clipping mask, like a layer clipped into it. It's like, because I was drawing this red, and I was like, it's not looking very intense, but we can bring some of that back by actually erasing out the top layer. Just give it a little shadow down at the bottom. Okay. Ooh, you know what's going to look good is if we take like a red, like a dark red color, and we actually color the lines in. I love doing this. Lydia has such expressive lines that I do all these layers where I like clip some color into the line art just to give it some really like extra character. So I'm going to actually color her line art. I'm still completely honoring the shape of her lines, because I don't want to like pretend that I'm the illustrator here, you know? Just trying to enhance what she's already done. So I'm just gonna like color these veins in red. Make them. It'll add. It's weird because I'm zoomed in, so you're not getting the sense yet until I zoom out of the level of intensity that this kind of stuff adds. But man, doing these kinds of color holds on the line art on the top layers, it really adds a lot of character. It also, I did a video about this. And it should get a lot more views. It's like one of the best, I'm sorry, but it's like one of the best tips we've ever given out, which is like, if you do this effect of like coloring in the line art like this, but you do it on like mountains in the distance, it like knocks the background back instantly, and it like gives your comic this crazy sense of depth. Yeah, that's cool. So here it is with line. So that's what it looks like in the original black line art, and here's just a little bit of red color hold. Just adds like a sense of, again, it's just like about adding the sense of intensity to this whole thing. Is it possible, Emily says, is it possible to get similar visual effects without such dark background tones? Without such heavy shadow? Like, oh, you mean if you're working, yeah. So if your art style is much more like outlines or lighter shading, and you don't have, I mean, again, like our stuff really leans into this heavy brush style. So you get these really dark shadows. Yeah, you can see it over here on the edges of the water. It's like really intense, right? So the good news about coloring is that you don't need these heavy shadows to get to get the sense of contrast, right? So if I turn the lines off, here, I'll turn the lines off. We'll do a line check. I've made videos about line check before. So if I turn the lines off, you can actually see I've actually pushed the colors pretty hard down here and below the eye. Like, that's a pretty dark value. As far as like comic coloring goes, like a lot of comics are colored with much brighter sort of like, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like comic booky tones, right? Like they're pretty intense, like bright intense. But if you don't have the darker darks in your line art, you can always do what I'm doing here and just push the colors really dark in the shadows. And that's something that like, so Lydia and I went to high school together, we took drawing and painting, and we took like a watercolor course. And I remember our teacher at the time would always when you're using watercolor, it's very fiddly and you're very tempted to like be delicate. And he would walk around and he'd say, push the shadows. He'd always tell us that, push the shadows. And so, because you're afraid to do it because it feels like too much commitment. So I brought that over to digital coloring, that kind of watercolor attitude of like, you gotta go harder than you think on the darks, on the shadows. And you can start to push that contrast purely in color. Like you can see how dark it actually is getting in some of these areas without the lines on. So it's totally possible. You just have to kind of have that sense of commitment when you do it. Gabriel Franklin. I hope I say your name right. Hi. Hello. We're just trying to... I actually think this panel is working better than I expected already. I'm just trying to get this... I want to get this whole panel done on stream. Man, this yellow highlight isn't working, though. I think it looks better without it. Maybe it's just not, it doesn't really make sense, because the other thing is I'm just kind of making up lighting at this point, but that's fine. I'm going to turn it off. We'll come back to it. Maybe we can save it. So kind of on a roll with the actual eyeball here. Let's push again. So in the spirit of pushing the shadows and adding contrast, I want to push the eyeball even further. So I'm going to take a red and do that. Like just go really dark behind it. That looks cool. But maybe, so one thing that I'm always careful of, this is just a personal thing. I don't love this like soft airbrush look. So in Photoshop, in any digital program, if you use a soft brush, you can get some nice like soft edges on your brush strokes. But it kind of is a crutch for me, speaking for myself. That airbrush look can get, your whole thing can look soft. And that can look really digital. So I try not to use, see how soft I put in the red here? I kind of don't like that. Like I kind of want it to feel more intense. So I'm going to undo it. And instead I'm going to use a halftone brush, which is like something I do all the time. I'm like Mr. Halftone brush at this point. So I'm going to use, because that'll give me that sense of like, it's not just a circle. Like if I took like a hard brush with hard edges and I just stamped it in there, it would just be a circle. And I don't want that either. But the halftone gives you this like non-digital feel. But it also gives you a little bit of softness around the edges, and that's why I like them. So let's see. Yeah, that's cool. And what's cool about these brushes, these are True Grit halftone brushes. True Grit texture supply. If I press harder, I get more intense dots. So I can kind of fade it out to the edges here. So I get the sense that there's like an intense redness behind it with a little bit of fall off towards the edges, but it doesn't look digital. It actually looks the opposite of digital. It's quite literally a replica of like analog printing techniques. Man, I actually like that so much I might do... Ooh, let's do it in the bottom. Ooh, do I like that? It's a choice. Hang on, let's see. It's a choice. We can always undo it. It's on... I'm going to put it on its own layer so we can undo it. So I'm going to call it eyeball bottom shading. Ash says, your videos are so inspiring. I'm working on making my first webtoon. Your channel keeps motivating me to stick to it. Oh man, you should shout it out. Shout it out to everybody. Or maybe it might not be out yet. When it's out, you should like comment on one of our videos that it's out. And we'll spread the word for you. Okay, so I like the idea of this halftone, right? It adds a lot of texture. It's really cool. But what it's doing is it's also damage. It's the same tone as the red veins. And I also, so if I turn it off, I like that the veins that I put in here are red on the bottom of the eyeball. If I put the halftone on, I also like that effect, but you kind of start to lose the veins. So I'm just going to flip through some blending modes real quick. So you'll see this start to pay attention up here. And up here on the right, and we'll flip through some blending modes. And you can kind of see the color start to shift. That's not bad. Overlay's not bad. Okay, we'll do that, and we'll put it on like 75. Yeah, that's cool. In fact, so now that it's lighter, I want it to be larger. So maybe... let's give a little texture in here. It's super cheesy. It's called Crimson Blue Unplanned Harmony. That's, I don't know. Crimson Blue Unplanned Harmony sounds kind of dope. It sounds like a real anime. Like it's got that kind of like cadence of like a manga or anime title. It's about 4 of the top pop idols being forced to create a supergroup. Forced to create a supergroup. That's kind of interesting. They're imaginary? I'm assuming that in your universe they're pop idols, but in reality they're your own OCs, right? Like the pop idol, you invented pop idols for this, or are they based on real people? Okay, yeah. So I'm trying to think. So we could do. So if you think about an eyeball, okay. I'm trying to explain my thoughts here. Sometimes I get so in the moment that I have trouble even verbalizing what I'm doing, but I'll try to explain. So an eyeball is essentially a reflective round sphere with 2 shapes, like the skin of your eyelids, like overlapping it, right, on the top and the bottom. So the light essentially is coming from above on this sphere, and it's starting yellow up top, up here, and it's dropping off to a darker color down here. But the lid, the top lid, would technically, we're super close on the eyeball, so we can actually like play with, a little bit of shading. I don't know that you'd actually see this on somebody's eyeball, but screw it, we're going to do it just because it's technically geometrically correct. The lid on the top of your eye would technically cast a shadow. If the light was coming from above, it would technically cast a small shadow onto your eye. So we'll do... Oh, wait, okay, we got some layers on. Just do a new layer. So we're just going to do like a little indication that it's casting a shadow, just to make it feel like 3-dimensional up against the eyelid up here. And it's a little intense, so I'll soften it back in a little bit. Yeah, these texture brushes are a choice. Like, it sometimes can look really good, and sometimes that, kind of like crackly quality can be a little distracting. So I'm just going to like reduce the opacity a little bit. It's kind of cool. Okay, and so in the spirit of lighting, because yeah, we're going to get to the actual fire in the eyeball. I'm going to render it more, but I'm just trying to, right now that's just a shape to kind of give me a sense of like what that shape does for the composition and what kind of color values are going to be there, so I can make kind of more informed choices around it. Maybe actually, I think I want, so I've got some nice halftone shading. I think I kind of want to go in with some like non-halftone shading just to give it a little bit more confidence in the shadows. So I'm going to go to like a 30% brush. I guess we stick with red. Oh, oops. Except I have to actually pick a non-halftone brush. Okay, yeah. And we're just going to go... I think I actually want to use the pen tool for this. I'm having a lot of trouble getting the right curve, and I want the curve to be pretty precise because it's like a very round object. So I'm going to use the pen tool and just give myself a little bit of a guide. And I can go outside the boundaries because this is all a clipping mask onto the shape that I've already drawn, this eyeball shape. And again, it's going to look way too intense. It's going to be too much, but I'll knock it back. Yeah, see how, okay, so that's kind of nice. Layering the halftones, yeah, that looks much more like what I want. So layering the halftones over top of a more concrete shape is usually what works for me. It's kind of most of the look of this book. So if I turn off the, I gotta name my layers better. So if I turn off the halftone, it looks okay. It actually, like, I think a lot of colorists, they would just do this. I mean, that's like a really solid look. But I want to have it, I want to give it that extra like old school grit, so I just put the halftone on top of it. And that combination still, it gives you the confidence of a like harder edged line and the texture of a halftone. I think it works really well. Bro, this is fire. Thank you, Swift. Swiftfoot, is that how you say your name? Yeah, it's literal fire. It's not quite as fire metaphorically as it's going to be when I'm done, because I want it to, it's going to get like actually a lot better. We're still in kind of early stages, but I'm just bringing that kind of like, I'm just bringing that kind of like edge confidence under this halftone as well. Again, like this is what most comic colorists would do. It's like a nice, clean, solid shading on it, but just dropping those two halftone layers on top just gives, I don't know, just gives it something, man. That extra texture, that extra something. All right, good luck on midterms. Oh, is that happening? I guess it is December. Good luck on anybody who has tests or midterms. Can you have a free copy of 1, 2, and 3? Yes, but you have to make your own comic and raise money on Kickstarter to prove that you took away all the lessons that we have given out. Only then can you unlock free comics. All right, so this is cool, man. So yeah, I like this a lot. I think, all right, so we got to go in with, I want like a, again, this is like we're coloring a sphere, a reflective sphere. That's what an eyeball is. So I'm going to do, I really want that like hot spot, you know, like when you've got light shining on a sphere, you get like a round highlight on it. So I'm going to do it here. First, I'm going to start with like a, oops. Oh, see, I've already used some of my brightest colors in my palette. So maybe we just go white and set the brush to, yeah, it's on 33. Maybe, I don't know. It looks okay. I'm a little hesitant to go pure white though, because it's starting to damage like the saturation and the intensity of that, of the yellow orange color palette we've got going. Like I kind of want to save that bright white for the flames themselves. So oh, it reminds you of the Starro scene in Suicide Squad. Yeah, man, I didn't even think about that. That's true. I guess a subconscious influence or something. Great minds think alike. Ooh, that's kind of nice. So I just like set it to overlay to kind of get it to like, I want you to feel that highlight. I don't necessarily want it to be like the brightest part of the drawing. Like I don't want it to distract you. So like before, it looked like that. It was like a really bright white. But when it's on overlay, it kind of drops back. It's kind of cool. All right. And we'll just give it a little extra highlight just to give it that kind of like three-dimensional quality. I don't know. I don't really know if that's real. I don't really know if that really happens. If you get the, I feel like in anime, whenever somebody has like a highlight in their eye, there's always two. So that's, I'm just doing it here. Mitosis finally got Wi-Fi back. Bad storm in the Northeast. Yeah, so I'm in the Northeast too. It was wild today, man. Lydia had her Wi-Fi out for a long time. The artist the bad ink artist who I'm coloring her work, she wasn't able to get on the internet for like 5 days or something. Her Wi-Fi got knocked out. All right, this is working pretty well. So we need to work on the flames in the actual eye. But one thing that I'm careful to do, I try not to overdevelop one part of the drawing. Like I think a danger is you get really focused on one part of a drawing and you just like, you keep polishing it, making it better and better and better and better. And then you sort of forget to work on other parts of it. And that's kind of what I've done here. Like the eyeball looks amazing, but I'm kind of like neglecting the detail in the other parts. So I need to like, before I dive in and actually like work on the flames in the actual eye, because I think there's some cool stuff we could do. I want to take a step back and not forget what I'm doing, which is, you know, the whole thing. So we'll do some rendering on the frost. And for this, I'm going to look at the reference of what I did over here. So it looks like it's actually not that, there's not a lot of dark parts in the frost over here. But I pushed the highlights. Like it goes to pure white here on the frost in her hair. But maybe because we're closer in, we're going to want to go a little darker just to give it some more dimension. So we'll add some light shadowing here. All right, so first we'll do shadows. I'm just going to go full opacity on the brush. Is there a Batting Studios Discord? There should be. A lot of people ask. I actually use Discord myself, but I don't know. There's just... there's a laundry list of things to do every day for Bad Ink Studios. And some things just are on the bottom of the list because more important things keep getting put on top of the to-do list. You know, it'll be stuff like somebody had a problem with their order. Like, we should definitely handle that first. And like every day, start a Discord is on the list, but it's at the bottom, and like more and more. Every day you wake up and you're like, maybe today will be the day that we actually take the time to properly set up a Discord and like mods and everything. And then, you know, then something else happens. And you're like, oh, we have to do our Kickstarter. Oh, we have to make sure that we like sign up for a con before the deadline ends. So you just never get to it. But we should have a Discord. It would be really fun. I really want to give people a place to like talk more. I think it'd be cool to like foster some kind of community where people could actually share their art and like give each other constructive feedback and tips and stuff like that. Because the comments on social media aren't exactly the best for that. Yeah, so I'm just putting some shading on the sort of frosted eyelashes here. And I'm careful not to take the, you can see that I'm kind of stopping the shadows before they get up to the, so like up here is the top of the eyelashes. But I don't want to shade the top. I want it to feel like this is a curved, eyelashes are curved, right? They're curved down. And so there'd be much more shadow on where that curve meets the eyeball here. So to sort of enhance that feeling, I'm only shading the bottom. Because I want there to feel like there's this glimmering bright frost on the tips of the eyelashes. So I kind of want to not go in too dark there because I want to be able to go back in up here with like bright whites and highlights. And if those bright whites and highlights are sitting next to the darks, it's going to look really weird. It's going to look like over rendered. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So Ash, your day job is in video games. Okay. So, weird story, but I actually have met the Hearthstone dev team, or I did early on, like in 2016. I had to meet, like, this is a weird story, but I actually went to Blizzard headquarters and I met the Hearthstone dev team, and the Overwatch dev team at the time. But they had a whiteboard, and they had like a list of like things that they had to do, and it was the same thing. There was like this constant like, we know we need to add, you know, like this kind of button to the UI, but it's so low on the whiteboard, and every day we have to write new things on the whiteboard. So there you go. They were talking about that. That's, in my mind, that's how it feels. It feels like we have like a game dev's whiteboard, and there's like a to-do list on it. And like there's a lot of nice to haves, and every day there's like an emergency or something that's like way more important, and it's just like, and starting a Discord is on that list. Is on the bottom of that list. But yes, it's something that I really want to do. I would really like to start a Bad Ink Discord. How do you print out your comics? I create comics, but I do not want to manually print them out and staple a bunch of them. Man, that's how we started. When we were in high school, Lydia and I went to Kinko's, which no one uses anymore. We printed out, we ran copies off of our comic and like took a paper cutter and like those old school paper cutters, and like trimmed off the edges. And actually, I had a block of styrofoam that was like left over from something, I don't know, like my PS2 from the PS2 box. And I would like fold and lay all the papers from the comic like together, and I would staple into the styrofoam, and then I would fold, like flip it over and fold the staples by hand. That's how we actually like started when we were like 15. Definitely don't do that. It sucks. It takes way too much time. So what I recommend is, I mean, here's what I'll say. Don't spend too much money. If you're young or you're just starting, like don't spend too much money printing comics, because if I were 15 now, like starting my comic book journey, I started when I was getting serious about making comics when I was 15. Back then, you kind of had to print your comics. Like there were no iPads, there were no like Comixology, you know what I mean? Like if you wanted to sell your comics, you would print them somehow, like usually at Kinko's, and take them to a local comic store, and they would put them in the like local rack, and then they'd get all messed up because nobody would buy them, and they'd stay there for months, and people would just be like moving them around, and they get all folded in half. But if you are young or starting out now, I think embrace digital for the time being. I think if a platform like Webtoon existed when I was 15, it would have been a dream come true. Like, you mean I can, put my stuff online, anyone can see it, and I can use social media to like drive people there, and I don't have to like pay for printing? That's amazing. But if you're getting more serious about comics, or you want to start doing it more seriously, then print-on-demand services have also gotten really good in the last like 10 years. They also did not exist when I was first starting out comics. So we use a service called Comics Wellspring, where you can upload your files and then like as a PDF, and then they'll mail you your actual comics. That's how we print our comics and sell them. And they will do low runs. Like you can do you could print like 10 copies. The cost of your comics scales with your runs. So if you print like 1,000, your cost per issue is pretty low. But if you print, 10, they're going to charge you a lot for those 10, but you'll still, not print too many and not have boxes and boxes to deal with. All right, so the shadow layer works pretty well. I kind of like it. Now that I see the shadow layer in, I am realizing that I'm going to need a lot more love on the shadows below the eye, but we'll get there. Yeah, exactly. The nice to haves always get moved lower down the whiteboard, or metaphorical whiteboard, or literal, because someone found a game-breaking bug or decided to add new features for the next big update. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what a very, very small comic book publisher feels like, because we have so much to do. I mean, even just making a video a day, which is what I was doing for a long time, like making a short a day and actually making them good is like an entire job. So then you have that, and then somebody buys a comic because your shorts are doing well, and then you have to ship them. That alone, that's a full-time job right there. And then you're like, well, every day I would go to bed and be like, I don't have time to start a Discord today. But I think once Interdimensional 3 is out, like once I actually finish this and it goes to press, like I'll probably take like a social media break and maybe spend some time like catching up on a lot of that kind of stuff. All right, so it's time I kind of want to get the highlights in on the Frosty eyelashes. But I'm going to use a halftone. I'm going to use a halftone brush to do it because I want that frost to kind of feel like it's, I don't know. I think a halftone will feel like a halftone pattern will make that white highlight on the eyelashes feel like it's like a frosty crystallization, It's kind of what I was doing. Hang on. Yeah. So you can see I did it over here. Oops. You can see there's a lot of white halftones that I just put over top all these dots in here. You can see them here. You can see them up here. And it like really adds to the sense of like frost crystals. It's a cool effect. Okay, so this is Frost. We'll call it in honor of the years that my formative years As a teenager, we're going to call this Frosted Tips in honor of the hairstyle of my youth, the early 2000s. Mary says, did I make her nose ring frosty? Not yet, but we're going to get to it. So on this one, she's got a nose ring. Here, you want to do that right now? We'll do it real quick. So here she's got a nose ring, but there's like too much orange on it. It's not frosty enough. So here, we'll make it frosty right now. I just have to figure out what layer it's on, because I didn't label any of my stupid layers. All right, hang on. We're going to frostify the nose ring. Here we go. And we're going to call this layer Frosty Nose Ring. We're going to get like a pretty dense halftone brush. And set it to like a tight halftone pattern, like a 30% texture. Yeah, there you go. So check this out. We're going to frostify this. Ready? We're just going to frost her teeth up too. Just like some extra white highlighting. There you go. Yeah, that's better. It looks much colder. It's really intense. I guess it makes sense because the metal would get very cold to the touch. There you go. Frosty nose ring. So here, I'll show you up close. So there's before frost, after frost, extra frosty. There you go. Save. I did it. So I'm going to bring a similar effect to the eyelashes over here. I remember Keen Spot being the big webcomic site in the early 2000s, but social media didn't exist well enough to get your name out there. Yeah, it was people. It's hard to explain. There were actually like a lot of it's hard to explain the internet like before 2006. That was like the first year that I remember using Facebook, when like Facebook wasn't cringe. Because there were like there were platforms to do things. Like you could post your videos or post your, I mean, it would take forever to download videos, but you could post your art, you could post your videos. But like it was so self-contained within that community that you had to like figure out a way to like get the word out within that community. It was a much more difficult space, and I think people don't appreciate like the early people who succeeded back then. Like they really deserve respect for making that journey. Okay, so I'm adding frost to the eyelashes, and at first I did it where I was obeying. Here, I'll turn off the lines. So there's this bright blue eyelash shape that I put in, right? And you can use what's called a clipping mask, where the layer above it only fits inside the boundaries of the shape. So the shadows are clipping masked in so that when I'm painting with the dark blue, like here, if I paint with dark blue down here, it doesn't break the bounds of this shape that's below it. So originally when I started to paint these frosted tips in, I was having them obey here. I'll paint some more in so you can see. They were like clipped into the shape. So they didn't exceed the boundaries of this light blue shape. So there's outside and there's inside, right? So that's I think how a lot of coloring is done, where you have what's called clipping masks. The things that are on top are obeying the shape of the things below. It sort of like gives it a boundary to stay within, right? But I want it to feel like it's like these ice crystals sitting on the eyelashes, so I'm going to actually like unclip it, because I want it to break the bounds of what I've already done. It's rare that I do this, but I want that frost to be sitting like outside, just up here on the top, outside the boundaries. And that'll make it feel more real, like more like real frost. Because, I mean, snow crystals, quite literally, like if you actually look like up close, they'll sit on top of your skin, on your hair. Everybody say bye to Mary. Bye, Mary. Later. Yeah, that's cool. It's sort of, very rarely do you want to do this where you like break the boundaries of the previous shape. It's a way to make something, give it a certain, like, it works really well for glows or for like if you've got like water like splashing and you've got like misting water, it works well for that. It also obviously works really well for frost. So I'm just like intentionally roughly painting it over top, not trying to like get too obedient to the shape that I already put in. It's sloppy, but in this case it reads as like realistic. Yeah, it's pretty good. Thanks for all your videos. You're welcome, man. Sir or madam or non-binary individual, however you identify, you are welcome. So crazy that we've made videos that people care about. I still can't believe people care about our videos, to be totally honest with you. I never thought that. I mean, again, the reason I put the subscriber count in the lower right of the stream just because it like blows my mind to see that like increase minute by minute. I cannot believe people care about this. But thank you. All right, this is cool. I think what's working about this panel is the highlighting is really like bringing it to life. Like the highlighting around the edges of the eyelashes looks good. There's this like really strong highlight in the actual eyeball. There's the highlighting in the flames in the eye that's making the flames pop. So maybe we should make sure we add some good highlighting down here too, because this is all frost. This is all creeping cold coming up the bottom of the panel. Yeah. See, you like watching the word bubble videos? That was the biggest surprise. I never thought that I could make lettering interesting to anyone. And I think our lettering videos have like a combined like 30 million views or something. Like I think our best performing video is a lettering video. So crazy. There was another comic creator on social media who was like, I think he made a video that was about my word balloon videos. And he was like, dang, like I knew all of that. Like I knew the rules of lettering, but I didn't know that you guys didn't know that. And he's like, how come I didn't think to make those videos? Like bad ink, like dang, man, like I wish I had thought to make those videos. And I was like, sorry, I guess I did it first. But he was cool. Like we're cool. He was just like laughing about it. I knew that about lettering. I didn't know you didn't know that about lettering. I didn't know that a video would be good to talk about that. And I was like, yeah, you can't take for granted, like he's a really experienced comic creator. Like he's been doing this for decades, you know, like you can't take for granted all those weird little things that we've picked up along the way. Like you have to think about a time before you knew them, you know, like when you were younger or when you were first starting making comics, regardless of your age, like you don't know that stuff. You take for granted how much you learn just sitting here and doing this, you know? Yeah, I kind of did notice, I agree, like, that I noticed there wasn't a lot of content about lettering. And by the way, I'm going to be doing, so once I finish coloring most of the book, I'm going to be doing lettering on stream too, just because I know people are going to be interested. I mean, lettering is a much different process. Like coloring is fun. You get to kind of try different shadows out and try different highlights out and see what's working and what's not working. It's really fun. Kind of a little bit more relaxed. Lettering's a little bit more of like a real, you have to be a little bit more disciplined. Like it's a real graphic design challenge and you kind of can't fudge stuff. So I don't know how it's going to do on stream. I want to try it, but I'm definitely going to be doing some comic lettering on stream. I just don't know that it's going to be like, it's a little bit more rigid. Like you have to kind of like scooch in the spacing between letters and like adjust the leading between lines and make sure you're like, you know, you're fitting everything correctly in the spaces so that the eye has a nice path to follow. So we'll do it on stream, but I don't really know if it's going to be quite as like chilled out and fun. We'll see. But I mean, again, I'm just going to be live streaming what I'm doing anyway, which is making comics. So it's going to be part of the process. So I might as well show it, you know? I'm just trying to get some darker shapes in the bottom so that the frost, because what's working so nice about the eyelashes up here at the top is the frost it's really bright white, but it's up against this dark, rich purple. I mean, it works so well, that contrast. So I'm trying to make sure that because I don't want to just have the only cool part of this panel be the eyelashes. Like I want there to be this part at the bottom is like pretty narratively important. She's having this coldness overtake her, and that's coming up from the bottom of the panel. So I want to like really enhance that. So I kind of need to bring that contrast that will give those whites that I'm going to put on the frost like that much more dimension. I want to give it a base to pop. All right, but I'm totally losing the edge of the panel here. Okay, so there's the boundaries of the panel. So the secret, though, is that it's not all going to be purple down here, but I'm focusing more on value, on contrast, and sort of a heavy shading so that this stuff has something to pop against. And then we're going to actually turn a lot of it blue, because the whole bottom of the panel needs to feel like this creeping coldness, and I just really feel like the only way to communicate that is with blue. So I'm actually going to take this pretty dark, rich blue. So down here on the left is my color palette for these sequences that take place inside the dreams. So it's kind of like I've purposely given myself this pretty limited color palette. How many colors is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, hang on, I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Okay, so there's 18 colors in this palette. And it's really nice to give yourself a limited palette because it kind of keeps you from swirling too much. Like when you can use any color, you tend to like get overwhelmed, and I don't know, just doesn't, you kind of get paralyzed. It's like the freedom of choice is too much. So I wouldn't normally use a blue this intense, but it's in my palette, and that's going to force me to use it, and that's going to force me to kind of think differently, and that's going to force this book to kind of feel united, which is a good thing. But I might cheat and use some blending modes on it, but we'll get there. So I'm actually going to move this up to the very, very top, because I want this blue that I'm about to put on, I want it to affect everything. I want it to affect the light blue frost. I want it to affect the color of the shadows. I want it to affect like the whole bottom of the panel. So I'm going to go really big brush and just like give it a gradient, like shrink the brush a little more, darken it up. Okay. Yeah, see, this is better because now it's much more balanced up top. Like now we've got a richer color up top, this rich purple up top, and sort of a rich blue down below. But it's too blue, so I'm gonna flip through some blending modes. This is something I do all the time. Here, I'll make it bigger so you can see how it's affecting it. So as we flip through, you'll see the blue. Ooh, that's interesting. Start to affect the layers differently below it. That's actually not a bad start. I don't know. Let's see. So that's overlay. Let's see what else we can do. Okay, so that's normal. What did we like? We liked overlay. It's all right. I think I want to go even further, though. I'm going to do another layer on top of it. And don't worry, we're going to get some highlights back in. So that, because right now this frost is getting, it doesn't really look like frost anymore. It just looks like a blue blob. So we have to go back in and do some work on it. Okay. And then, oh, I should obey the shading color I used up here. So in the eyelashes, I've got this like specific kind of blue. How many panels do I do per day? Oh man, it depends on how good of a day I'm having. On a bad day, I do half a panel. On a good day, on a really good day, when I'm like locked in, I can do, like I did this in one day, this top half. The chili man, all the burning flames, the water behind him, and this insert panel of her face. So on a good day, I can like get dialed in and knock out like half a page. I don't know that I've ever done a whole page in a day, but that's just because this is not my full-time job. If comics were my full-time job, I could probably do a page a day easily. But I have, unfortunately, like quite a lot of other things going on, so we do what we can. And I'm glad, Mr. Haywack, I'm glad I helped you with your webcomic. Again, I just can't believe that people care. People are helped by this at all. I mean, it's not something that we expected. Just kind of made content we thought was cool, and people seem to really like it, man. All right, so I'm just going to get some shading into the bottom here. I feel like I maybe didn't do actually a good enough job getting the shape of the frost in the first place. It's a little messy, so I might actually go in and do it a little bit more carefully. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so if you look over here, you can see that I did some really nice like detail work, kind of getting this like, especially where, see this purple line right here on the where the yellow is. I kind of went in with an eraser and I like erased it out to give it a bunch of those like I guess like half circle negative spaces. It kind of gives it like a really nice defined edge, so that when you zoom out, it just feels a little bit more polished. It's like an actual shape. It's like this, like, it almost looks like ocean waves, series of like crescents that you erase out. And that gives it kind of a nice defined edge that just feels more polished versus just a bunch of like random, like rough brush strokes. which is kind of what's happening in the frost here. Like you can see I just kind of was like roughing this stuff in. So before I do anything else, let me actually like clean up the edges here. So we're gonna get the right color. Yeah, so I'm just turning a bunch of layers off so I can really see. I just put this shape in kind of to get a sense of where it goes, but you can see that I'm not at all obeying Lydia's original line art, so we got to clean it up. So make sure I got my eraser up because I'm going to be doing a lot of like erasing out stuff. We're just going to like, oops, do it a little bit more carefully. Again, like nothing in comic coloring has to be like, you've got lines sitting on top of it, so nothing in comic coloring has to be like perfect, perfect, perfect. But you do kind of want to like, you kind of want to obey what the line artist had in mind, you know? It's like their vision. William says that eye is really awesome. You talked about stealing color palettes. Did you steal any particular color palettes for the eye? Well, I think I made a video about it, but I stole the bottom part here. I didn't, again, I use the word stealing because it's like it's an incendiary term. Like kind of gets, when you use the word steal in art, you know, like in the caption of your video, it kind of gets people perking up and paying attention. It's not stealing to be inspired by color palettes. And it's not a literal stealing. I didn't sample it like directly, but the orange, the yellow, like down here on the right, I don't know if you can see them. Can I make these bigger? No, I guess not. But the red, the orange, and the yellow down here on the bottom left, that's directly inspired by the carpet in The Shining. It's like really intense like late 70s colors. Those colors were really popular at the time. So I didn't sample them literally, but I was trying to get something close to The Shining. And then when you use them, there's like this weird translation where it kind of feels like horror and you don't know why. And I think it's because it comes from these like weird inspirations and like somehow the spirit of it transfers. Hi, Miles. Welcome. Thank you, Mitosis. I appreciate it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know if people realize like, I don't really mind, I guess you're right. I guess it's sharing. Sometimes I'm not teaching directly. I think if I were teaching all the time, it would be a little bit, if I were like, hey, I'm a teacher, I'm going to teach you how to do this. I don't know that I'm qualified to do that or that people want that kind of energy. So I kind of agree. I think sharing is a good word for it. A lot of times I'm not telling you exactly how to do something. I'm sharing a process that we do, you know? And like if you're switched on, like if you have the brain of somebody who's switched on, and anybody can get to that state, you know what I mean? It has nothing to do with what kind of, you know, person you are, what kind of personality you have. You just have to mindfully make a choice to pay attention in a certain way. I've talked about it before with like reading comics. Like if you switch your brain on when you're reading comics, it's like it becomes learning, you know what I mean? Like everything is all there. Sort of how I feel about our videos. Like the people who are kind of like switched on a little bit and like paying attention, like they see what we're doing and they'll watch a video that's not necessarily like a direct tutorial, but they'll say like, oh, I never thought about using color in this way, or like the brush in this way, the brush tool in this way, or whatever. So yeah, I just kind of share. A lot of it is sharing, and then kind of the teaching happens from people who are kind of paying attention, if that makes sense. Learning how to learn, you know, it's like what every teacher tells you. I love the shape of the frost. I really feel like it's taking over the character. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, again, I can't take credit for things like the shape of objects because Lydia drew them. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of being a good comic colorist is like getting out of the way of the line art. Like obeying the vision. I mean, that's what being a good inker is, you know, like understanding what the original vision was vision, get it? Understanding what the original vision was of the penciler or the inker, and like obeying those lines and those forms, and like really trying to like enhance what they wanted to do, you know? Okay. All right, we're close on this panel. I don't love the blues on the bottom. They're like a little too like Hawaii ocean. I have to be really careful with blues in this book because I want everything to feel cold. But if you go to like ocean blue, then that your mind goes like, oh, tropical water, oh, warm. So it's like a really weird dance that I'm always doing. A lot of coloring is like understanding people's existing perceptions of color. You know what I mean? Like if you think of the names of like paint swatches or something, like they always give them names like of something you associate, or like Crayola crayons. So like understanding people's perception and how they're going to perceive color is like really important. And I feel like this is maybe a little too like ultramarine, warm ocean blue. So maybe we actually like, let's see that. Yeah. If the blue gets too, that's what's so weird. If the blue gets too saturated, it can look like warm ocean water. It's a really tricky dance. That's better. What is that? Wait, did that actually change? Just gaslighting myself. Hang on. Oh, I think I made it worse. Okay, never mind. We'll worry about that later. And one thing I should do too is continue to go back to my split screen mode and check how this is looking. Because again, I want everything to feel like it's in the same world. Yeah, I don't know, man. There's parts of this that are, so there's something, okay. So there's something nice that's happening over here on the right, which is that there's this like frosty paleness to a lot of stuff. Whereas over here on the left, it's like, maybe the colors are too saturated sometimes. Like I'm losing that kind of like white veneer of frost. So we'll have to figure out how to bring that back in. Some of that is probably just desaturating some of this, actually. I really think I might have led myself astray with these like modifying layers on the bottom. Yeah, see that already, okay, so check this out. In my attempt to add shading over here on, if you can see the layers, layer 79 and layer 80, when I turn them on, the blue gets much more saturated. I actually think that you want it to feel like dead and cold. So I'm going to mark these as red, which is my way. I don't want to delete them in case I ever want them back. But I'm going to mark these layers as red. And just kind of, that's like my note to myself, like, don't open dead inside. Like, maybe this wasn't a good idea. And we'll maybe fiddle with it a little differently and come back to it and see if we still want to keep those layers. Yeah, pastier. Like paste. Again, this is all about like perception. Color perception is like your perception of things is like when something is like dead or like losing warmth, it gets paler, you know? Yeah, I think you're right. I think I gotta like imitate what's happening on the eyelashes. Felt, yeah, I know, right? I feel you, Steven, man. I think maybe, again, I might have deviated from my color palette. So I've got this really, I did this for a reason. This shading color that I've got, this like blue color I've got on the eyelashes, that's from my color palette over here on the left. It's this one. And it's an intentionally kind of like paler blue. And I think in my attempt to add shadows and get all clever down here, I like deviated from my palette too much. So let's do that. Let's bring that back in. We're just going to imitate the eyelashes. What's working about the eyelashes? Yeah, it's already better. I know it's weird, but it's like, that makes such a difference. Like this paler blue adds to this like coldness, this like deadness of it. It really works. I still think we could go darker and more saturated just at the very bottom. I just have to be really careful. Let's see. Because there is this water down here, which is what her head is sticking out of. So having a sense of that water bleeding in, what color is the water? I mean, it would be good. Oh, interesting. Okay, so the shading that I did up here on the water, is it the same color? It's close. All right, so it's just okay. So I actually was pretty correct using the colors that I'm using. It's so interesting how colors can look different in different contexts. Oh, you know what it is? I have this like blue, that's what the secret is. I've got this like richer blue halftone over top of it. So that's how you kind of like push, I think that's the secret. That's how you push it a little bit more rich blue without like totally damaging that coldness, is you use a halftone with, it looks like okay. So there's a halftone over top of it with like kind of a rich blue. So that's what I'll do. Okay, so okay, this is the secret. So we keep the shading kind of pale, and then we're going to, over top of it, do this like richer blue halftone and see how that feels. And that'll give it the sense of like darkness creeping in from below, but I think it will keep it from being too saturated. Hopefully all this makes sense. Sometimes it's hard to explain all this stuff. How big are the dots? So for those who don't know, this brush settings palette, when you use these halftone brushes, the dots come out a certain size, right? So you can see that the dots are about that big. When you lower inside the texture settings of the brush, when you lower this scale thing, it changes the size of the dots. You can make the dots much bigger. You can make the dots much smaller. So tighter, obviously the smaller the dots, the tighter they are together, the less you actually see the dots and the more you perceive it as more of a solid color. So there are cases where you want like much more subtle, smaller dots, and there are cases where you actually want like a lot of space between the dots so people really feel that texture. And I think here is probably a 40% moment. Yeah. And again, when you press harder, you get more dots. Oh, here's my cat. Oh. Everybody say hi to my cat. Come here. No? All right, well, she's just going to stand here, I guess. Let's see. So, yeah, that's kind of interesting. And then what's nice about having some halftone texture in the shading is that it doesn't make the whites that are halftones feel so out of place. Now you've got halftones in both your shading and your highlights. Pretty cool, man. All right. Some pretty good progress. I think this one needs to kind of like, this one needs to come a little bit further. There's something I haven't quite figured out yet. That's something working over here on the right that's not in the one on the left yet. But I think it's just there's like a paleness to it. There's like a desaturated quality to it that feels like this like coldness. So I'll have to figure out how to bring that in to the, I don't know, to the one on the left. But I think that's like a lot of progress for one session, right? Like, wait, I'll show before and after. So, oh yeah, this is my dog, by the way. I have a dog and a cat. Both. I know. So this is where we started. We had nothing. Here, let me center. Yeah. Okay, so this is where we started. It was just a yellow panel. And then here's what we did today. Pretty good, man. You can see how, like, the fact that it was a yellow panel ended up meaning nothing. Like, I usually just use a random color to just, like, roughen the shape of a panel so that you can kind of see just where it is on the page, right? Like, that's what this one over here on the left, I just put a gradient in because I'm like, all right, well, there's going to be some kind of, like, yellow and orange in it. I don't know whether I'm going to keep it at all. It might end up being, you know, like a purple and blue background, like it is up here. But yeah, really that yellow that was in this panel is just a color hold, just to give me a sense of, okay, there's a panel there. And then when you actually develop it, it turns out that it's a predominantly blue and purple panel with a yellow and orange sort of like popping lead element. I know, my dog just did the Snoopy yawn. She made that like whiny yawn sound. Cool. Well, it's just kind of a short stream today. I just wanted to like rough in some shapes. Then it turned out I actually ended up rendering this one on the right like a lot more. So we pretty much finished a panel on stream today. It's not totally done. Like, it needs some love. I'll post like I'll put up a post on YouTube so people can see like where we ended today, and like I'll probably finish it off stream, and I'll put it up so people can see what it looks like, where it kind of ends up. But yeah, I'm probably gonna sign off here. I just wanted to kind of like, I wanted to make some progress live so people could see the kind of like thought process of like highlights and shadows and like value contrast, and like we did some cool stuff like, you know, going in and making the veins in the eye red just so that they had some like character to them. Doing the frost and the halftone so it felt like crystals, you know. Really like fell into a rabbit hole trying to get the blue right down here. But just trying to show everybody kind of like you know, what it's like live to do the thought process. I do use Photoshop for my coloring. But again, I said it earlier, it doesn't mean you have to use Photoshop. There's Procreate, there's, I think, Krita, and then Clip. A lot of people are using Clip Studio, so it's all the same. Yeah, I think the frost, yeah, you're absolutely right, 3M Turtles. What's working on the eyelashes is that there's this like defined shadow in the frost, and it's not in the bottom. So I think what you'll see, I'll post the progress, but I think what you're going to end up seeing is I'll probably bring that into the frost down below. Oh, and just a reminder that if you want to go to the Batting Studios Bandcamp, the soundtrack, the official soundtrack to this issue is up. It's like a mix of like John Carpenter synthwave and dungeon synth. I spent the last like couple weeks recording and producing and mixing that album, and it's up, and it turned out really sick if you like electronic music. You can kind of get a preview of the vibes of this book. And if you backed the Kickstarter, you get that album, a digital copy of that album for free. Also, we sold like a bunch of cassettes. A lot of people bought tapes of that album, so you'll also be getting a download code for your for the albums if you bought tapes. But if you didn't back the Kickstarter, I think the album is up. It's there for $1. So check it out, because it's fun to make music inspired by our own artwork. Oh yeah, GIMP. A lot of people use GIMP. I really honestly I think when it comes down to it, all these programs are the same. Like, they're not, like, some people have preferences, but like if you have solid understanding of like color and shadow and light and like expressive anatomy, like if you can draw on a piece of paper, you know what I mean? Like, you should be able to use any of these programs and get some pretty good results. So, but shout out Adobe, because I use your stuff. You should sponsor us. So, you know, nobody from any company has ever contacted us about a sponsorship, but I'm just saying, I would take your money in exchange for shouting you out more often, because, you know, these it's not, you have to sell a lot of comics to pay the bills. That's all I'm saying. So we could use some help. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. And we'll be doing more streams, and just continue to talk through the process. And I'll cut these streams into highlights so you can kind of see, if you miss the streams, you can see like what we do on them. And yeah, just keep tuning in. This is really fun for me, and hopefully everybody learns something. But yeah, good night, everybody. I'll let the music play you out as we end it. So yeah, thank you. Good night, everybody. I'm gonna go eat dinner. Happy holidays, and may all your comics be successes.